too. So yeah, okay, as you're probably sick of hearing by now, our theme in these Sangha Nights is Buddhism through time and space. So we've been looking at how Buddhism has expressed itself and adapted itself to a whole range of different cultures over the last 2,500 years, and what that can tell us about how we can practice the Dharma in this culture here and now. And as you might have impinged on your consciousness, this June has been designated Buddhist Action Month, and with a particular emphasis on caring for the environment. So tonight I'm going to introduce a Japanese teacher, a teacher from Japan. For the last few weeks we've been looking at Japan, whose teachings I think can tell us a lot about our relationship to our environment. A teacher who I think is very relevant to Buddhist Action Month. And this teacher is Kukai. Can you read that?
Yes.
Good, okay. So Kukai. Kukai is the man who founded the Shingon school of Buddhism in Japan. And Kukai, that name, literally means sea, sky. The two syllables, one means sea and the other means sky. So it's a very apt name, actually, for someone who, as we'll see, had a really deep feeling for nature, a really close connection with nature, for whom the appreciation of nature and the beauty and spaciousness and mystery and the silence of the natural world is very much part of his approach to Buddhist practice. So Kukai, you might also hear about him as called Kobo Daishi, sometimes also called Kobo Daishi, which means great teacher who widely spread the Dharma, something like that. Anyway, he always has been, I think still is, one of the most popular and respected figures in Japanese Buddhism in Japan. Not just for his spiritual teachings and his practice, but also because what we might call his worldly achievements, if you like. He had a huge impact on Japanese culture. He was a leader who could really get things done that others couldn't. Even when it came to mobilising people for major civil engineering projects, as we'll see. So the style of Buddhism that Kukai introduced into Japan came to be called Shingon. It's not there anyway, but it came to be called Shingon. But it's what is called, often called Tantric or Vajrayana Buddhism. Vajrayana is not quite the same as Tantra. Vajrayana is probably a better term, meaning the diamond vehicle or the thunderbolt vehicle. It's the vehicle that breaks through. I haven't got a lot of time to go into detail about this tonight, but very briefly, the Vajrayana was the third major, if you like, styles of Buddhism to develop. So it's a later form of Buddhism that developed, as it were, from Mahayana Buddhism. People often talk about the three yanas, the three vehicles, or the three paths. So firstly, there's the more conservative style of Buddhism that its detractors call the Hinayana, the lesser vehicle. There's nothing lesser about it, but its detractors call it that. That's today mainly confined to Southeast Asia. And then we had the development of the Mahayana, which we've been talking about for some time, the so-called great vehicle, or great way, which is sometimes talked about as a new development, but was actually, in some ways, an attempt to get that closer to the Buddha's original teaching, the spirit of the Buddha's original teaching, when maybe some of the older schools have become a bit literalistic, a bit stuck in the letter, too focused on the letter of the teachings, and not enough on the spirit. Mahayana has also been called Northern Buddhism, which is a terrific generalisation based on the fact that it was the main style of Buddhism that spread to the north out of India. But then from the Mahayana that we've been talking about, we get the development of the Vajrayana, the diamond vehicle, the diamond way, the way of the Vajra. So this very much grew out of Mahayana Buddhism. So one aspect of Mahayana is that it opens up a vast, if if you like, mythic perspective. It incorporates all sorts of archetypal Buddhas that never existed in the flesh, but represents aspects, all these figures who represent aspects of the enlightened mind that we can encounter in meditation and in visionary experience. So that's one thing about the Mahayana. A second is that it sees the goal of the Dharma not just in terms of the individual human being, not just in terms of the individual being becoming more enlightened, but all beings becoming more enlightened. It sees our practice as about, if you like, the whole universe becoming more enlightened. It encourages to think not just about our own progress, but about the progress of all beings, the evolution of consciousness on this planet, if you like. And that's what our practice is about. It's a part of that. So the Mahayana gives us this incredibly inspiring perspective, this huge cosmic perspective for our practice, and this big archetypal perspective for our practice. But the problem is that it can be a little bit highfalutin. If you read some Mahayana sutras, I mean, they're great. They're this cosmic science fiction. They're sort of Buddhas revealing different world systems and bodhisattvas coming from all over the show. But you might actually find, have to search quite hard for something you can actually do. So it opens up this vast mythic perspective, incorporates all these archetypal Buddhas, but it maybe gets a bit too distant from the realities of everyday life at times. Everyday practice, everyday life in the everyday world. So you could be a Mahayana Buddhist maybe and read all these wonderful scriptures and maybe be very cosmic but never really engage with what's under your nose. Never really engage with what's under our noses. So in the same way that the Mahayana was needed, if you like, to get back to something closer to the original spirit of the Buddha's teaching, when things had drifted a bit, now the Vajrayana did the same thing with the Mahayana. When things had got a bit too sort of cosmic, it brought things down to earth. And it did this by connecting practice very firmly with concrete reality. Getting it down from the realm of cosmic ideals to the here and now. So while staying in touch with the archetypal very much, but staying in touch with the mythic dimension of experience, it focuses on how we make this apply to specifics. So it's not just about how we relate to some visionary Buddha, it's how we relate to this real flesh and blood teacher. It's how we express our mythic vision in this difficult situation that we encounter. It's how we behave with this person who we can't stand. It's really annoying. It's how we create powerful bonds with these particular flawed people, our brothers and sisters in the Sangha. Not some sort of Sangha of bodhisattvas, but this lot. How do we create real bonds among us? How do we make that real? These people are the Sangha for us, it's not bodhisattvas. So how do we do that? So the real Vajrayana practitioner keeps up this perspective of the mythical and the archetypal, and try to embody that in their practice, but they develop and express that archetypal dimension through the actual concrete happenings and challenges and people of this everyday life. So the real Vajrayana practitioner connects the archetypal with the everyday. They connect the everyday with the archetypal. Or as the title of this talk, which I think was publicised, says, they make the mundane sacred. They make the mundane sacred. They go beyond the illusion that ordinary life is this sort of grey, boring thing, or that the ordinary world we inhabit is something we should escape to into some lovely, fluffy, spiritual world. It goes beyond that and asks us to wake up to the fact that properly seen, the whole world the whole of existence, all the people in it are a miracle. They're a marvel. There is nothing unimportant. The world and our life and the people we relate to are always full of deep mythic meaning. Everything we do gives us an opportunity to express that. That's the sort of Vajrayana perspective. I mean, that vision of the Vajrayana, once again, it's not something new. It's there in the Buddha's teaching. Vajrayana Buddhism just re-emphasised something when maybe quite a lot of the tradition was in danger of becoming too ethereal and sort of otherworldly. And of course it's a perspective that we need too. We need to see our practice in mythic terms. We need to have a big perspective. We need to have a vision that we're living out, a long-term vision. We need an archetypal dimension in what we're doing. But we also need to express this in the particular details of our everyday life and with the people we come in contact with. What we do for a living comes into it. And how we do that, how we deal with the problems and difficulties of life and of people. How we can minimise our impact on the environment. How we can help create this Sangha and spread this Dharma in this city. Not some sort of ethereal abstract. So Sangha, the founder of the Tree Ratna Order, has said that we are a Vajrayana Buddhist movement. We are a Vajrayana Buddhist movement because we relate our practice to what's absolutely tangible. Absolutely tangible. It's not just about meditation experience, it's about how we live. It's about how we live together, how we work together. That's why we see it's important to create what we've called team-based right livelihoods, cooperative businesses, where people can make their work part of their practice. They can make the challenges and stresses of a day at work a means of transformation. Why we think it's important to encourage the growth of communities where people live together, where living together with other people, all their stuff, becomes the working ground we use to go beyond that narrow focus on me and my wants and my anxieties. We use that. But whether we live and work in a community or work in a right livelihood business, whatever we do, we need to live a life that uses the challenges of every day as the sort of crucible for our practice. So yeah, Sheffield analogy. The challenges of everyday life are the crucible in which we melt ourselves down. So that we can become something brighter and purer and stronger. Steel with carbon in it. So that's the theme I'd like to bring out in this talk. How Kukai, this guy we're talking about, how he made the mundane sacred. How his vision was about the sacredness of the ordinary, of the sacredness of the world around us. And how he brought together the spiritual life and worldly activity. How he expressed that by acting in the world, being very, very effective in the world, because he was. For Kukai, there's no division between the world we inhabit and the spiritual world. For him, if we see clearly, every bit of this world is sacred ground. A miracle, although we're usually too dulled and blind and deluded to see that. So as the talk goes on, I'll be unpacking a bit about this aspect of Kukai's vision and his teaching, and exploring how we can learn from him, maybe in ways that will change and transform our relationship to our environment, that will impact on our relationship to environment. But before I do that, I want to just talk a bit about the man and his life. He's an absolutely fascinating figure, Kukai. So Kukai was born on Shikoku Island in the south of Japan in 774. It was quite early on in the spread of Buddhism to Japan, 774, the Christian era. And he was born into one of the very noblest aristocratic clans in Japan. It was a clan who produced many famous generals, statesmen, poets and scholars. That was the sort of background he came from. And when he was 14 years old, one of his uncles took a real shine to him. One of his uncles thought, this guy is brilliant, this lad is brilliant, this lad is going places, this lad's got a mind. And this uncle was himself a distinguished scholar, and he was a tutor to the Crown Prince of Japan. So he was teaching the royalty, the royal children of Japan. And this uncle got Kukai sort of accepted into that circle. So he was being taught with the princes of Japan, basically, by their special tutors. So he took him to the capital, he took him into his home, and he educated him along with the Crown Prince. He learned Chinese, which was the language of civilization as far as Japan was concerned at the time. He learned Chinese, he learned history, he learned poetry, he learned philosophy, he learned the Confucian classics. And then when he was 17, he entered the very highest educational institution in Japan, which was a college in the capital that existed to educate the sons of the aristocracy, to fit them for high government positions, as high government officials, sort of top civil servants, if you like. So he was being groomed to be a high flyer, to become one of the top members of the ruling class. But while he was at college, probably much to his uncle's chagrin, he came across the Dharma. So he wrote a thing called, I can't remember what it's called now, Indications of the Way or something like that, where he imagined a dialogue between a Confucian, a Taoist and a Buddhist. And he was obviously being educated a lot in Confucianism, because that was the sort of way you governed the country. And he sort of had the Buddhists dismantle the Taoist and the Confucian arguments. His one biography tells us that he felt all the things he'd learned at college were just the dregs left over from the men of the past, which did little to benefit him in this time and would be of no benefit after death. And he thought it was essential to learn the Dharma. He wanted to learn the Dharma. So he became a Buddhist layman. In other words, he wasn't formally a monk initially. He wasn't formally a monk. He left college. And he left his glittering prospects for a career. He left this amazing sort of future that he was going to have, supposedly. And he went off alone into the deep mountains to practice the Dharma and to meditate. And in the mountains, in his little hut up in the mountains, he had deep meditation. He had a number of visions, actually. So in one vision, he saw the sword of the Dharma hurtling towards him. Spiritual death. In another vision, he saw the planet Venus come out of the sky, come into his mouth and into his body. Right, sounds good. Presumably Venus had some of the same connotations of sort of love, etc. I don't know. Anyway, a number of these sort of visions are recounted, but he obviously had very, very powerful meditation experiences. And we know that for the next few years he spent time meditating. He spent meditating in the mountains and forests, and he also spent time studying the Dharma. He visited a number of Buddhist temples, Buddhist monasteries, and just investigated the Dharma. He was deeply interested in finding out about the Dharma. And at the end of this period, he became a novice monk. So he became a novice monk. He cut off his hair and he took the 10 precepts, which are the same precepts that members of the Triratna order take today. But still he wasn't satisfied. He wasn't satisfied with the Dharma he'd come across. I think this is a continuing theme in some Japanese practitioners, that the Dharma got there in bits and bobs and they weren't quite sure what it was all about. He wasn't really convinced. He felt he wasn't getting the full truth. He wasn't getting what he was really needed. And we're told that during one of his retreats he prayed earnestly before an image of the Buddha for help to resolve his doubts and find the teaching that he needed. So he prayed really earnestly, help me find the teaching I need, help me know the path that I need. And that night he had a dream. And in this dream, a man appeared before him and said, "The Vajrayana Sutra is the doctrine you have been searching for." Don't know if you ever had a dream like that, where something, you wake up and you think, oh, I've got to do something. Just those words ringing in his ears, the Vajrayana Sutra is the doctrine you have been searching for. So he set off in search of the Vajrayana Sutra, which cannot have been easy to find, because according to scholars, it had only just been translated into Japanese in the last few years. So maybe we can imagine him walking from monastery to monastery, from temple to temple, from places with a library, one place with a library to another place with a library, all the time asking, have you got the Vajrayana Sutra? I'm looking for the Vajrayana Sutra. And nobody ever heard of it. I don't know, never heard of it. And then at last he comes to a monastery where the librarian says, hey, I think you're in luck. I think one of our brothers actually just came back from visiting another teacher, and I think he bought a copy of something that I think was called the Vajrayana Sutra. Yo! What's going on? Yeah, here it is. So Kukai's got the Vajrayana Sutra, what his dream had told him that he must look for. So he takes it to a quiet place, and in huge excitement, he opens it, and he starts to read it. And you can't make head or tail of it. It's complete gobbledygook. What's it talking about? If you've ever seen the Vajrayana, I have seen the Vajrayana Sutra, and if you've seen it, you won't be surprised. That was my reaction, actually. You get the sort of sense, there's something really important about this, but what it is, I'm not quite sure. It is not a straightforward document with some nice, clear teachings. It's more poetry and myth than it is rational teaching. In fact, it's all poetry and myth. To begin to understand it, you need a background in Tantric Buddhism and Vajrayana. You need the guidance of a teacher who's going to explain that this relates to that meditation and this relates to that. You need the oral instructions on the meditations that it just alludes to. So that must have been a huge disappointment for Kukai. He's got the sutra, but what does it mean? But Kukai wasn't someone to be put off easily. He'd heard that there was a style of Buddhism being practiced in China which was based on the Vajrayana Sutra. So he thought, in China, I'll be able to find a teacher who could tell me what on earth this is about. So the next time the government sent a delegation to China, when Kukai was 30 years old, Kukai volunteered to go. And you might think, well, why would they let him go? Because he's just this dropout from the mountains. But actually, there's a reason why they probably would have let him go. Because the Japanese government regularly used to send sort of flotillas, little fleets off to China, which was the centre of civilization, to bring back culture, bring back teaching, to bring back artworks. But Japanese shipbuilding was so bad, and their navigation was so appalling, that they nearly always got shipwrecked. And we're told that whenever a trip was announced, the court officials used to vanish. They didn't make I've got to, my granny's ill, They'd all make a run for it because nobody wanted to be part of these expeditions. Others had nervous breakdowns because they thought they were going to be sent. So maybe it's not so surprising that everybody got. Kukai says, "I'll go." Anyway, so Kukai did make it to China, despite his ship getting lost, landing in completely the wrong part of China, being stranded in a swamp, the usual sort of things like that. And in China, he did succeed in finding a teacher who could explain the Vajrayana Sutra and introduce him to the practice. This man was 60 years old, nearing the end of his life, and he soon recognised Kukai as the pupil he'd been looking for. Someone who could continue his mission, someone who could keep this lineage going and really knew what it was about. And what's more, someone who could take it to a whole new country. So he adopted Kukai as his successor. taught him everything he knew, initiated him into all the meditations. And Kukai felt a deep bond of gratitude for this man, right to the end of his life. And when his teacher died, he returned to Japan. He returned to Japan, taking many texts with him, but also taking many painted mandalas and artwork with him. And I think that's really quite important, because for the style of Buddhism, the approach to Buddhism that Kukai was taking, it's not just texts that are important. What's important is the mythic, the imaginal. And that can be communicated through artwork, through mandalas, through paintings, and images, just even more than it can be communicated through words. So Kukai, to cut a long story short, after many vicissitudes, Kukai introduced this new style of practice into Japan. And eventually, when he was about 45, high up in the mountains in a place called Mount Koya, he established the first monastery of his new Buddhist school in Japan, which came to be called the Shingon school. Shingon means true word, which is a reference to mantra, actually. Mantras are the true word. They're the words that really come from another level of reality. Okay, so what exactly did Kukai teach? And what has that got to do with the theme of our talk, and indeed Buddhist action love? Long explanation. To explain this, for the benefit of people who are fairly new, I need to take a bit of a detour into the basics of Vajrayana Buddhism. So in Mahayana Buddhism, from which the Vajrayana developed, we find all sorts of archetypal Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who represent aspects of the enlightened mind. So you might have come across a few. You might have come across Tara, the female embodiment of active compassion, Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, Manjusri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, Vajrapani, who represents energy and strength and the power to break through. You might have come across some of those. Different aspects of enlightenment. So there's quite a few. There's a few some of those aren't even Mahayana. There's a few of those in the Mahayana tradition. And Vajrayana sort of takes it further. There are hosts of figures that people meditate on to connect with some aspect of enlightenment. And one particular feature of, well, in a way, both Mahayana and Vajrayana, is that these figures are often organised into what are called mandalas. Okay. So in a mandala, there's usually a central figure, and the central figure is the sort of central theme, if you like, of the mandala. And around the central figure are other figures who represent aspects of that central figure. They're different, but they're not really different, they're aspects. An analogy that's sometimes used is like white light becomes split into the various colours. They're not different, but they're not the same either in a way. So the most well-known of these mandalas is the mandala of the five Buddhas, which some of you will come across, the mandala of the five Buddhas. So in this there's a central Buddha, and then in each of the four directions there's an archetypal Buddha who represents an aspect of enlightenment. So just to choose two of those, there's in the east there is the Buddha Akshobhya, who's blue, who's associated with cool, clear wisdom that's above it all, that's above events, that sort of cool, clear wisdom. Blue being quite an appropriate figure for that. And then on the opposite side, on the west, you've got the red Buddha, representing the aspect of the warm heart, the passionate love of others, the heart aspect of enlightenment. And these seem to be quite different to us, maybe. They're on opposite sides of the mandala, but actually, and we might have to develop them in quite different ways. We might do the metta bhavana to develop the amitabha aspect. We might do the mindfulness of breathing to develop the sort of akshobhya, the cool clarity aspect. But in actual fact, they're two aspects of the enlightened mind, absolutely inseparable. They're not different for the enlightened mind. So, this is the mandala of the five Buddhas, and there's four Buddhas on the edge, and there's a Buddha in the middle. Buddhas on the edge representing different colours, representing different aspects of enlightenment, and in the middle is the Buddha Vairochana, who is the white light that combines all those colours. He's the white Buddha. All the Buddhas, other Buddhas in the mantra, in his mandala, like Akshobhya and Amitabha, are aspects of Vairochana, the aspects of the enlightened mind. And the name Vairochana means illuminator. Okay? So the Mahavairochana mantra, Mahavairochana Sutra, is the sutra of the great Vairochana. Vairochana means illuminator, the source of light. I've seen it translated as sun, actually, so it's likened to the sun in the solar system, that all the lights of the other planets come from that white light. It's a central figure. So that Vairochana is the centre of the mandala of the five Buddhas. And that's the Vairochana referred to in the Mahavairochana Sutra. The text that Kukai was told in a dream would solve his doubts, giving the teaching he needed. And for Kukai, Mahavairochana is the nature of reality itself, which is the same thing as the enlightened mind. Kukai's interpretation of this sutra gives us this sort of mythic vision in which all things and all beings are manifestations of this nature of reality. Which is the same thing as the enlightened mind. All beings are what he calls body minds. They're body minds. The body and the mind are two inseparable aspects of the same thing. So each of us, each being, is a body mind. And these body minds are manifestations of the body mind of the nature of reality. Or speaking mythically and poetically, they're all manifestations of the body-mind of Mahavairochana. The trouble is that we're all cut off from this fundamental basis in the nature of reality. We're cut off from Mahavairochana by our past karma, our accumulated unskillfulness, by our delusions, by our ignorance of the way things are. We're all trapped in our deluded, darkened, separated body minds, cut off from the source of illumination that is Mahavairochana. So that's not a completely new idea in Buddhism. In the Mahayana Prajnaparamita Sutras, texts on perfect wisdom, we hear the nature of all things and all beings being described as suchness. Suchness. So suchness is a sort of nonsense word used to point to the fact that you can't say anything about it in a way. Used to point to the mysterious, inexplicable, ineffable nature of things. What's it all made of? It's just such. It's just what it is. So it points to the mysterious, ineffable nature of things. And this suchness in the Prajnaparamita Sutras is not seen as some neutral qualities. It's described as being deeply peaceful, blissful, a fountain of positive qualities, nirvanic. If we could but see it, all things have the quality of nirvana. All things have the quality of the enlightened mind. We could say that all things are sacred, all things are holy, if that language has positive connotations for you. If they don't have positive connotations, we need some other way to express the same thing. That sense that all things are imbued with beauty and deep meaning and mystery. And value beyond our usual way of thinking. I realise that I've only printed out half my talk. Well, sorry, Matty's only
It's not that one.
No, afraid not. Anyway, I thought it was a bit short. Okay, I'm going to have to make it up as I go along. Hey, that should be interesting. I've got one page left. Okay. So, the way Kukai expressed this was through this mythic, poetic vision. in which all beings and all things are in their deepest essence manifestations of the body and mind, the body-mind of Vajrayana, the great illuminator at the centre of the mandala. He's not saying we're already Buddhas, you know, we've all got Buddha nature, we're already Buddhas. Obviously we've all cut off from reality by our karma, by our ignorance. But he is saying that by Buddhist practice we can align ourselves with Vajrayana. We can allow Vajrayana, the enlightened mind, the nature of reality, to manifest through us. For Kukai, Buddhist practice consists in aligning our body, speech and mind with the body, speech and mind of Vajrayana. That's what it's all about. So that we become manifestations of the great illuminator. And our practice, so Kukai called the body, speech and mind of Vajrayana the three mysteries. And he saw our practice, the way we allow the enlightened mind to express itself through us, was to align our body, speech and mind with the three mysteries. We're probably not going to relate to some of the ways that his Shingon school did this. They involved an awful lot of highly complex rituals, detailed mudras, detailed sort of gestures and mantras. But many of the aspects of the practice that he recommends would be very familiar to us. So one way we align ourselves with the body, speech and mind of Vajrayana is by practicing the precepts. Kukai saw that as vital. Unskillfulness of any sort he saw as part of the barrier that prevents the three mysteries manifesting through us. We may not want to do elaborate rituals, but we can connect with the deep meaningfulness of our every action. The fact that even the things we think of as boring routines can be expression of our deepest potential if we see ourselves living an ethical life in the world. And then there's meditation, obviously. So Kukai saw, he had this idea that, I'm making it up now. I'm not making it up, but he had this idea that this enlightened mind, this nature of reality, wasn't just something passive. It was always trying to get through to us. And it would get through to us in any jolly old way it could manage. So if we, it would get through to us in meditation. When we experienced that sense of spaciousness in meditation, that was the nature of reality getting through to us. When we experience deep metta in meditation, that was the nature of reality getting through to us. If we had visions of a Buddha in meditation, that was reality getting through to us. Reality could take any form it wanted to get through to us. If it wanted to appear as an 8-headed, 1,000-armed whatever, it would, you know. If that's what was going to work for us, then it would. So it would take what forms it needed to do. So our meditation experiences were reality trying to get through to us. People could be reality trying to get through to us. Somebody might, for a moment, for a while, be acting as the body, speech and mind of Vajrayana. So the person who gives us just that right teaching at the right time, that's reality getting through to us, that's Vajrayana. That book that we come across that just tells us just what we need, that's Vajrayana trying to get through to us. That artwork, it could speak through artwork, that's Vajrayana trying to get through to us. So the goal is for us to be manifesting the body, speech and mind of Vajrayana. It's always trying to get through to us. And yeah, so if an artwork gets through to us, then, well, maybe the artist is quite a flawed person. But maybe the body, speech and mind of Vajrayana were manifesting through him, at least while he made that artwork. If a teacher, maybe a very flawed teacher, but maybe if it really got through to us, something was coming through them for that time that was bigger than them. So that he sees the whole of reality as trying to get through to us in this way. He sees the whole of reality, if you like, as I said, as sacred ground, and our practice being to align ourselves with that. So for for Kukai, the whole world is alive. The whole world is a manifestation of being. It's alive. And Sangha has said, the founder of our order, has said, a world seen as dead is not a world in which there is any hope of gaining enlightenment. If we see ourselves living in a dead machine, if we see ourselves as sort of machine-like beings living in a dead machine, we're done for, spiritually. We need to see ourselves as part of a living, meaningful reality in which spiritual values are sort of woven into the texture of things, in which beauty and spiritual values are woven into the texture of things. They're absolutely part of the way things are. So we need to wake up. Yeah, we don't usually see that because we're too dull, we're too deadened, our awareness is too low. And we've been profoundly conditioned to think of the world as a machine and to think of the world as just random atoms, whatever. But that is not the view that Kukai is taking. That is not the view. That is precisely the opposite of the sort of vision of Vajrayana, seeking to get through to us. And obviously this has got profound implications for the way we see our relationship to our environment. If we see our environment as a dead machine, then maybe we're at perfect liberty to plunder it, exploit it, use it as a rubbish dump and poison it. If we see it as a miracle that we're part of, something that's imbued with beauty, we're going to treat it with beauty and meaning, we're going to treat it with a degree more respect, actually. We're going to treat it with a degree more respect. And in a way we're going to treat ourselves with a degree more respect too, because we can't be separated from our environment, actually. As Buddhists we know that. We should know that. Bear with me, making it up. I think that's just a really crucial point. And I think this image, this sort of vision that of Vajrayana that Kukai presents, okay, I can understand that it might ring alarm bells with some people, because it could sound a bit like some sort of pantheism or like Vajrayana's God or something. But I think we need to sort of remember the way the Dharma sees things. We in the West have got a terrible tendency when we're presented with an imaginal vision, a poetic vision, a mythic vision. We see it as metaphysics. Yeah? So we're asked to, live in a world where Vajrayana is constantly trying to get through to us and we can manifest that. And we think, it's God. And then what he's saying is it's presenting us with some sort of metaphysical, philosophical structure. All good Buddhists know that you cannot describe the nature of things. Yeah? So what we're doing is we're looking for visions of the nature of things, imaginal, mythic versions of the nature of things that help us to live and help us to practice in a meaningful way, in a way that's going to work. What we need to avoid is making them literalistic. Vajrayana. If you make Vajrayana into God, you'll end up flying planes into skyscrapers, having crusades, whatever. But if it's a way of looking at the world that has got truth in it, but we don't try and make it a sort of dogma or metaphysics, then it can have some real juice. I think it can have some real juice as a way of changing the way we see things. And I think it really can change the way we see things. I mean, I think if we spend all our time in cities, we tend to end up living in a whole bunch of human agendas, somehow, human mental constructions. I don't know if you've ever spent a good bit of time out in nature, particularly on your own. Suddenly all those mental constructions fall away, and suddenly the world looks a deal more mysterious and beautiful and even scary than it does when we just sort of live in concrete boxes. So I think it's a really good idea to get out of concrete boxes and sort of open ourselves up a bit to nature. And as I said, I really do think this has got, this sort of vision that Kukai presents, has got real sort of relevance to the environmental problems that we find ourselves in. They arise because our society, treats the world as a dead machine. That's one reason they arise. They arise because because people equate riches with loads of stuff, with consuming stuff, with owning stuff, with being able to travel wherever we want, whenever we want, with being entertained all the time. That's a rich life. And as long as people have got that vision, well, hey, why wouldn't we plunder the world to entertain ourselves, to own things? I think what we need is to redefine that version of what riches constitutes, actually. I mean, we can tinker with sort of environmental things, but what's going to be ultimately needed is going to be a pretty big change in the way we see things, actually. If we see a rich life as a life with lots of stuff, if most people see it that way, then any move towards a simpler life is going to be seen as something to be seriously prevented and fought against. Nobody's going to vote for it. I'll vote for the party that's going to make me poorer. Yeah, great, I'll do that. That's not how we tend to think. But, the fact is, the only solution is for us to do less, make less, consume less, ultimately. Live a simpler life. If we've got a different vision of the world, maybe a vision a bit like Kukai's, that does not involve being poorer. That can involve being richer. If we see our riches as being about living a meaningful life, making a contribution, having deep friendships, positive friendships, being part of a positive community, a Sangha, experiencing the positive mental states that brings, having the sort of heightened awareness that allows us to appreciate simple things and not always want, great big artificial entertainments of one sort or another, then actually we can see that living a simpler life is also a richer life. And I think that's going to be key, actually, to moving beyond a consumer world. As long as we're in a consumer world, apart from the fact that it's demeaning to be a human being and see that as a consumer, it's also, what we're doing is we're sort of eating the world. We're stuffing the world into our spiritual emptiness and eating it, sort of. Anyway. I think we need to have some spiritual fullness so we don't need to eat the world anymore. So I think part of that just does come from connecting with, if you like, the sacredness, the beauty, the livingness of the world, and the fact that we're part of it. All Buddhists should know that. We don't exist in isolation. I think that a Buddhist life, I think us, we've got a responsibility to take the environment very seriously. I also think that actually, in a way, Buddhism's got a lot to offer the environmental movement, because I think, well, for a start, we should be living simply. We should be aiming to live, many of us, more communally, using a lot less resources that way. Ultimately, we should be aiming to develop what Sangha has called a new society. In other words, we should be creating a community together in which there are different values, in which there's a different vision of being, what it means to be a human being, where we don't need lots of stuff to be rich. We can be rich in very, very different ways. Personally, I think we're creating that. Personally, I think that the solution is going to come from people changing, not from tinkering around the edges. And I think I'm really proud to be part of the fact that I think we're creating a community where there are different values. Hey, I'd invite you to join it. Be part of that. Help create the new society. And that, I think, is the way we're going to do our bit to help the environmental crisis, among other things. Anyway, thank you.